We're talking about the fourth commandment today, or for Gloria, the fifth. My little spiel on the numberings. This the numbering. They're talking about the same stuff. It's just we number it a little differently. So don't get in an argument about the numbering. There's better things to argue about. Let's see here. So we're talking about honor your father and mother, and I'm not going to make it big, but I'll throw it up on the camera real quick. Actually, before we even do that, we'll just talk about what our opinions, or what our friends' opinions are. What does it mean to honor your father and mother? What do you guys think before we begin? What do you think that means? So Gloria just said love and respect. All right.
And try to listen.
try to listen is what Lee said. Yeah, Cheryl. So she says, isn't Japan a very good example of how they honor their elders? They could be. I'm not super familiar, but I know that a lot of Asian cultures do tend to honor the breadth of life a little better than, especially us in the West. That's the how else would you define this? Yeah, Kathy. So she says she believes that you mirror their behavior and actions. Is that did you want to add anything else to that? The way you treat people? And how you perceive value of things. Okay, so that's, yeah, so anything, for those of you that read the Large Catechism, we're going to get into it, but is there anything else that you would like to add to it? Like that's.
I think the word that I've seen a couple of times come up is reverence and awe.
Reverence and
we treat our parents, father and mother, much like we treat our Heavenly Father.
And because I referenced the Large Catechism, I realize I don't have it in front of me. I'll be right back. You guys can still hear me. I'm walking right now. As soon as Jack basically quoted the Large Catechism, I was like, oh man, like that's, I forgot.
I got it sitting right in front of me here.
Yeah. And then Gloria, you were about to say something. Oh yeah, parents that are hard to look up to, what do you do with those? That's a good question. And I think we'll do our best to address that, because so I always think it's funny. I've taught I really like the 10 Commandments. I think I made that known now, and I've taught it a lot. And there's always a trend line in the 10 Commandments, and one of those trend lines is my hot take on the second commandment, which we talked about last week, usually burns the house down, metaphorically speaking, of people that are older. Like they're normally like, there's a bunch of whataboutisms that come. It's like, what about this? What about this? Normally, my confirmation students, my hot take on it, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like I don't get challenged on the second commandment at all from confirmation, like middle schoolers. But this one, there are tons of whataboutisms on honor your father and mother from confirmation students. And I usually don't get a whole bunch of pushback from older people. But Gloria just hit one of their biggest ones is, what if the parent or leader, as we'll see, is bad? Yeah. What if that? And so we'll talk about that hopefully in a little bit. Oh, there's the Watts. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. And I want to make sure the thermostat. I'm feeling warm in here. I want to make sure. It is a little hot in here. All right.
Back a little bit.
We can see Midge, but not Ed.
Oh, hey, you're not supposed to make it fall.
At least it wasn't us.
Yeah, you're not, that's not supposed to happen. All right, so let's get into this just real quick. So we're talking about the fourth commandment, Watts. It's good to see you guys.
Yeah, we were knocking on the door, nobody was answering.
Oh, were you? I got started and then so.
You got distracted.
Yep.
It was, I missed you. If you guys see anyone else populate this side thing, let me know. Although this is the normal group here, so I doubt anyone else will come. But all right. So the fourth commandment, according to Luther's Small Catechism, says this: honor your father and mother. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not despise or anger our parents and other authorities, but honor them, serve them, obey them, love and cherish them. I agree mostly with that sentiment, mostly. And I'll tell you what I kind of don't agree with here in a second, but it's a pretty good definition. So here's what I want to do next is I want to look at Exodus chapter 20, the actual commandment here. So it's Exodus chapter 20, verse 11. And so I'm using the screen Bible is New King James. It's the reason why I use that translation is because it's on the screen. I don't have another one that sounds this good. I have an NIV in front of me. If you whatever you have in front of you works. And if something sounds different than anything we read, let me know. So here's the Exodus 20 verse 11 from the New King James. For in 6 days, oh no, it's not verse 11. What verse is it? Let's see here. Oh, it's the next one. Okay, so verse 12. So honor your father and mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. Now let's look at the next one just real quick. You shall not murder. Next one after that. You shall not commit adultery. Next one after that. You shall not steal. What makes, just in the syntax of how it's written, what makes this one different than the other ones? Do what? The priority? So let's look at this again. So the next one, so we have honor your father and mother, and then we have some extra stuff. It's the extra stuff I'm talking about. And then murder is like, oh, just don't murder, So what'd you say, Gloria? God gives us something on that one. This one has a promise connected to it. Okay? And I think that promise is important. And where we're going next in the Bible reiterates that promise. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. But the promise is that your days will be long in the land for the Lord your God is giving you. Like that's the promise of honor your father and mother means that your days will go long. Like that almost sounds like God is saying like your parents brought you into this world and they can take you out. Like that's
I always told my kids that.
You always told your kids
Yes,
like
I brought you into this world, I can take you out.
It almost sounds like something like that, right? And I think not specifically that, but I think that the kind of feeling behind that can actually be kind of what we're talking about, is that we tend to, I think how God has set up the creation, that when we are honoring our father and mother, and we're going to see that explodes and gets huge, it doesn't mean just our parents, but when we honor our father and mother, that we tend to see that society runs better. Okay? Like, so that's that's is kind of what I think it means, that it'll go well with you, or that's Ephesians, but that your days may be long in the land which the Lord your God is giving you. Yeah, sure. So Cheryl is saying it sounds like a connection between what his commandment and what his will is. Yeah. Yeah. So he wants you to live long in the land, and you're strongly encouraged to honor your father and mother. So I take a more causal thing, that if you don't honor your father and mother and everything that encompasses in all this, then you will struggle in the land. That it will not go well for you, which I think we can see that to a relative point. All right. So let's get into this a little bit more. Oh, this is the one that falls. Okay, yeah. Cheryl says it reminds her of the prodigal son. And so let's go to Ephesians chapter 4. Yeah, Ephesians chapter 4. Actually, it's going to be Ephesians chapter 5, I believe. Yeah, we'll get back into Ephesians chapter 4, but it'll be Ephesians chapter 5 to begin with. Because I think that Ephesians is Paul rehashing what this means to honor your father and mother in this section. So before we get into that, I want to read to you how Luther defines this commandment. And he says this: "For to honor is a much higher thing than to love. For honor includes not only love, but also respect, humility, and awe." I always thought that was an interesting choice of words. And awe, directed, one might say, toward a hidden majesty of theirs. I really like how Luther describes this in there. I can't remember where. It's right there at the beginning. It's like the second paragraph, Gloria. You have a different translation than I do. But yeah, I'll read that again. So honor is much higher thing than just to love. For honor includes not only love, but also respect, humility, and awe, directed, one might say, toward, and I like this one, a hidden majesty of theirs. And then he kind of continuing on, for if we from the heart are genuinely to honor someone, then we must have him standing truly high and great in our estimation. I don't have my camera on. Sorry, guys. We have someone that's standing high and great in our estimation. So then, before we get on to Ephesians here, then who are we talking about in this commandment? Like, the easy one is our parents, right? That our parents over there. But Luther, and I think when you look at the ancient Jews, they don't leave it at just parents. That they also start talking about all these other authorities. All these other authorities. And the easy ones is like Caesar, Caesar, or as we'll see in a little bit, like slave masters, or the police. And listen, you guys need to really listen to this one. Your pastor. and let's see, but also ones that pretty much any kind of leader, like mayor, like anything, like a store manager, like you have like all these people. And what I like about that is how he puts it, that there is a hidden majesty to it. There's a hidden majesty to it. Now, I think because of that, we start grazing into the question that Gloria brought up, that's always brought up by the confirmation students. Well, what if that person is wretched? How do we honor them? And I think that's what I like about that awe and a hidden majesty to them. And that's hard for us. That's difficult. And that's difficult. And I think that's why this is important, is because so it will go well for you. So let's get into Ephesians real quick, and we'll see where this takes us. Unless anyone wants to say anything. So
Yeah.
All right. What do you want to say, Lee?
I have a very big problem with
Yeah.
it. So if Caesar says, "Hey, look, go over there and kill that person,"
Yeah.
I'm supposed to honor his word.
So I don't think so. She said that if Caesar tells you to go kill that person, I'm to honor his word. I don't, and that's what I disagree with in Luther's Small Catechism. I don't like that the word obey is there. The word obey doesn't appear in the large one. That's because sometimes some of us have wretched parents, and we know that there are some Caesars that are not very good, right? And all of that stuff. So I've always made the distinction between honor and obey. That I think there's a distinction there, and I think that distinction can be maintained where there's someone that you disagree with vehemently, but they still are in that position.
Right.
Like your parents are still your parents, and that's why I like his wording there of a hidden majesty. Your parents always have a hidden majesty to them, even if they're garbage people. And I think that's why it says, "For your days will go long in the land." Like I think that's why it says that. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So she's saying that our life comes from our parents, and so there's an inherent dignity because of that God almost has chosen us through them, and we see through the revelation of Scripture that people in authority are there to maintain order, all that stuff, but like God's hand is on them in the positions of authority, right? Like that's a huge New Testament thing, right? So that is what is going on in there. So let's get into Ephesians, and I want to deal with just our section, and then we'll explode the section and look at around it. Let's see here. All right, chapter 5, Ephesians chapter 5. I'll get it to on here. Remember, that's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, the Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians.
Here's not chapter 6, Chris.
So is it chapter 6?
That's a discussion on children and parents.
Yeah, that's what I want. So chapter 6.
Chapter 6. And Paul uses it.
Five is actually where we're going to be going. Let's see here. Yeah. I had my page turned on itself. Thanks, Jack. Okay, so children, I was wondering why I wasn't seeing it. So chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, basically, And I can just read that to you because it's short. So it says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise. All right, you see what Paul's doing? He is connecting his idea here with the commandments. That it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. And fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, King James language, wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. Okay.
See, Chris, that's the two-edged sword, you know, because you were talking about before, you know, parents are, what do you do when you have somebody that's evil, okay? Or you still got, you know, as kids, okay, as children, we grow up, you know, learning to obey our parents, no matter what. I mean, even without question. I mean, granted, when we start getting into the, if I want to call it the age of reasoning, you start having those issues. And that's when you start expanding that thought process beyond the obeying and that silent majesty we're talking about.
Yeah.
So here you can see what Paul is doing now. He's giving both sides of the coin. You know, hey, you kids got to, you know, behave, obey your parents, vice versa. Hey, you as parents have a responsibility to your child.
Yeah. So don't exasperate your children, I think is what it says in the NIV or something like that. Yeah, that's there. That's looking at the context. I mean, does anyone have like any other, like Jack just shared some, and that was great. And we're actually going to get more onto Jack's point here in a second. But does anyone else have any thoughts about that? Yeah.
Does that mean you, or does that imply that you should more or less respect the position, maybe not the person who's in that position?
I think it's one and the same. I think it's one and the same. Like, yeah. So I think the position is where it's coming from, but there is someone inhabiting that position, and so you know that we do that. So Kathy, what did? Mm-hmm. So Kathy is saying that it's probably something that pertains to your life, and it's not necessarily something that just pertains when you are a child, but something that when we are, you know, 40s and 50s, and we still have parents that are there, so they're getting older and deserve honor as well. So you guys know how I act on stuff like this. I hate taking verses out of context. I can't stand it. And Jack actually helped us show that just a little bit with the one right there at the end. But why is this here in Ephesians? Why are we all of a sudden talking about children and fourth commandments and stuff like that in here? Let's look at the context of this and see what's actually going on. So now we'll go back to, I believe it's chapter 4. We're not going to read all of this, but we're going to read a lot of it, so we'll listen to it. So Ephesians chapter 4, beginning with, I believe, the 12th verse. And we'll start with the 11th verse. So Ephesians chapter 4, beginning with the 11th verse. And we'll have the computer read to us through like 16. So we'll listen to that real quick. Let me get it over there. Okay, here we go. And of course, it's got to download. All right, here we go. Oh, you know what? I forget to do things. I need to turn up the volume. And I can't do that from back there.
And he himself gave some to be
All right, here's 11.
And he himself gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints for the work of ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, that we should no longer be children, tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the trickery of men and the cunning craftiness of deceitful plotting, but speaking the truth in love, may grow up in all things into him who is the head, Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share, causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love.
Okay. So what did you kind of hear in that? What do you think's going on? What do you think is going on in there? Why am I starting here? Anyone have any idea? We're moving towards where Paul starts talking about children obey, or children, honor your parents and all that stuff. So Kathy says it's a process. Yeah. So in chapter, and she says it's a process where we grow into it. So I always take a book out of what it means to live in unity. And that seems to be what Paul's message is here as we move towards this. So if you look in verse 12, for the equipping of the saints, for the work of ministry and the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come to the unity of faith and to the knowledge of the Son of God, to the perfect man and to the measure of the stature, the fullness of Christ. That we would no longer be small and just be thrown to and fro by whatever passing wind and cunning craftiness, that we wouldn't have over there, but that we would speak truth in love and realize that he is the head of Christ. So he's beginning to craft a message of that we are kind of living together, that we are and so how then do we now live together, right? So what does that mean? And he sets all that up, and we're going to skip some of it, but we're going to get to the household stuff now. So Ephesians chapter 5, beginning with, let's see here. Where's the husbands and wives? Let's see here.
This is my favorite part.
Is that 21? Yeah, 21. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to listen to this through chapter 6, verse 9. So we're going to listen to chapter 5, verse 21 through chapter 6, verse 9. So let me get it full screen again. Let's see here. Actually, we'll start. Oh, hold on. We'll start in 15. We'll start in 15. Here we go.
See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Therefore do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. And do not be drunk with wine, in which is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord, giving thanks always for all things to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another in the fear of God. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is head of the wife, as also Christ is head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother, and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is a great mystery. I speak concerning Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let each one of you in particular so love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband.
And we'll continue on through 6. Come on, you can do it. There it goes.
Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with you, and you may live long on the earth. And you, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. Bondservants, be obedient to those who are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, in sincerity of heart, as to Christ, not with eye service as men pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with good will doing service, as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that whatever good anyone does, he will receive the same from the Lord, whether he is a slave or free. And you, masters, do the same things to them, giving up threatening, knowing that your own master also is in heaven, and there is no partiality with him.
Okay. What are we talking about here? In that section we just read, and that previous section from chapter 4.
I got nothing.
Do you have any idea? Well, like, break it down. What's the individual things that we talked about?
Respect for those in power.
Respect for those in power. Lee's jumping on
I'm sorry.
to the point. No, you're good, but you can kind of see it now. You can see where I'm going now, right? So that's we'll get there. We got a more road to get before we can confidently say that. So Kathy, you were saying something. So she's saying mutuality and treating someone like you would want to be treated yourself. Yeah. That's the husband-wife thing, children, parents, slaves, masters. There's yeah. Anyone else want to say anything?
There's one word in there I don't like.
With the respect?
No,
Or
obey.
The obey. Yeah, the obey.
You used the word.
The obey word.
Gene doesn't obey you. Gene doesn't obey you.
Now, understand, I had that removed from my marriage vows. I genuinely did. I did not say.
So if you guys come to a wedding service that I ever do, I have my own service that I made years ago now. Of course I do. Like I look at what's like the typical service and I fall asleep. So like I gotta create something for myself, and I really like what I did because I break it down. I have like the little sermon stuff at the top, and then I have what I call mutual forgiveness. Then we have the vows. But during the top, one of the first things I say after saying like, hello, everyone, it's great to have you here. I go, I just want to read from the Bible for you guys. Now, not everyone may like this verse, but I'm going to read it. And I go and I do this. wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Like, I did that. And then I talk about it, and like I make it like a big deal out of it. You know, I put the growl in the voice and all that stuff. But I do that because normally either people are really into this verse or the people are scared of it. And I don't think there is a reason to be scared of it, because a lot of people treat this one-sidedly. And I tell them, it's like, what does that mean? It means that the wife serves the church just like the wife serves her husband, just like the church serves Christ, right? And what's the feeling behind that? What's the feeling behind that? The feeling behind it is service, is serving, is lifting up your husband and making them better, at least making them look better than they actually are. And then husbands, it's like normally we hear that and it's like, oh my goodness, this is the best verse ever. You know, go make me a sandwich or something like that, right? Like that's not that, but that's not what does it. What does it say about the husbands? It says, love your wife like Christ loved the church. And what did Christ do? Like before he died, he got on his knees before the church, the disciples, and washed their feet. He died for them. And so I said, what I think this verse is doing, it's not giving one inherently more power than the other, but it's telling, it's not giving one power than the other, but it's saying that each party is that what I think you're supposed to do is to make the other one look better than they really are, especially in public. That is the definition of serving. Is that you serve each other to make each other better, right? It's this mutual service thing. And then you go down into the next one, talks about children. So if you take that and you also go back to what we look back in 4, and on your own time, you can read you can read all of Ephesians. It's all about people of God living in unity, serving each other and the community around them. That's what Ephesians is about. And remember, Caesar is in charge of Ephesus and everyone else, and it's not going well for the Christians. Okay? So you got to remember all that when they're saying all this. So then he talks about children and the parents, just as Jack pointed out, and he's talking about having mutual service. Like, hey kids, remember there's a promise to this, to respect your parents, right? So it'll go well with you. I think he's connecting that to what we just talked about. He's using the commandment to include that into our marriage stuff too, where he's saying, hey, it'll go well with you when you're doing this, when you're serving each other. So kids, serve your parents, and you show that by honoring them. And then also, parents, hey, serve your kids. Don't exasperate them. Then to put a nice bow on it so you can't misunderstand what he's talking about, he talks about slaves and masters, right? And he's like, hey guys, serve each other because Christ has served you. That's how he says about the masters there at the very end, right? Like that Christ has served you. I think what he's doing is that we build each other up. We have unity, and we do it in the form of service to one another, that we willingly live in humility and accept that even if there's a tyrant above us, it's like they have due honor because God has put them there. Even if I don't respect them at all, they have a hidden majesty about them. So when your parents are garbage people and they do things like they tell you, go rob that 7-Eleven for me, I don't think that is, I don't think you have to do that. But nor do I think that you should just throw them away, because there's a hidden majesty that is attached to them. And here's the crux. Are you ready for this? This is how I say this. And this is how we're going to say the rest of the commandments. Because we believe, as good God-fearing Christians, I think most of us at least, believe that God has established those people that are in all those positions, and especially our parents. And if we say that, nope, I want nothing to do with them, we're basically saying, God, I don't like how you created the world and I need to fix it. Right? And in that moment, we're raising ourselves above God himself and going, I know what's better than you. That doesn't mean obey, but sure as hell means some sacred honor. Right? And so I don't care what you think about the president, all right? Whichever president. I don't care what you think about Speaker of the House. I don't care what you think about the mayor, the sheriff, you know, I don't care what you think about any of that. Like it's, you can disagree and still be part of this. And so, and I think what Paul is doing, it's like he's going, listen, it's not about rising to power like that, but it's about becoming a servant of all those around you.
I don't think.
Now, does anyone want to say anything? I just said a huge hot take there. That's so that, yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. So Cheryl's saying it doesn't matter who it is, if they're above us, we look to them in truth and love. For truth and love. I think for truth and love, I think you're right there. I don't like the term truth and love in there, but I think good order is a good word to put there. Because I think sometimes our leaders, we don't get truth and love from them. You know, I think sometimes I talked with people yesterday that are dealing with domestic abuse stuff. And I think a lot of those people, the people that are above them, they don't get truth or love. You know, does that make sense? But I do think that there's some good order stuff. So, but it's not, our disposition, these people, isn't saying what they're doing is okay. You got to understand that. If someone is bad, it's not us saying, oh, it's complicit and we're just kowtow and we're not doing anything about it. But I do think there's something inside of us that we can like, all right, I'm still a servant. I'm still a servant. And there's a lot of people that I've talked to that have very terrible relationships with their parents. And we try to deal with what it means to honor them. But sometimes that honor means there's a little bit of distance there. Right? And so that's kind of how we deal with this. So then, to continue on, to further clarify the point, someone tell me the heading of the next thing in Ephesians right after the servants and the masters. What's the next thing he talks about?
Put on the whole armor of God.
The full armor of God.
Yeah.
And you guys know how I feel about context and all that stuff, Sarah. So Paul has just spent 2 chapters, right? He didn't write in chapters. We split it up for good order. But he just spent 2 chapters talking about being a servant, even in these difficult circumstances. He's talking about being a servant. And then he ends it with the armor of God. Now, the problem is we usually mess up the armor of God and think it's about gaining God's power and power over. It's like, ooh, I'm getting the sword out and I'm going to fight all my vengefulness and all that stuff. But we see that the creator of the universe has set the creation of the universe to where we can be blessed in the land that we are, so that it'll go well with you, by putting on the full armor of God, which makes us into fully the image of God and becoming a servant of all. So the swords we wield, the shields we wield, they're all in service, not of gaining and accruing power, but power of God, which means serving the community, because that's what we see Jesus did. That when we see Jesus comes in the world, he doesn't come in power, he comes as a small baby. When Jesus comes in the world, he doesn't conquer by force and get on a throne. He ascends up to the top of a hill on a cross. And that is what the armor of God is. And when we look at the armor of God, we see Jesus, we see the fulfillment of it in Jesus on the cross, and then his resurrection, which is lifting us up. So that is kind of my hot take here. And it's difficult. It's difficult. It's not easy. And one thing that you should see is that we're all guilty that we don't do this. We don't do this. We're all guilty of this. But that is why Jesus still went to the cross and served us, those that are guilty, and lifted us up and is forgiving us. So, comments. I know everyone's got them. I got my hot take. Like that's, and we got a few minutes. What do you think? You can disagree with me. You can always disagree with me. I would have disagreed with me 15 years ago. Yeah, Kathy. Yeah. So I'm not, so she asked, at what age is accountability given to the servitude? I'm really not big on age of accountability stuff. Like, and so I think, I think when, like my best buddy has twin daughters that I think they're 2 now. And they know when they're being nasty. They know, right? They may not know other things, and they may genuinely do some stuff that they don't agree with, but they know they're being nasty when sometimes, because they'll look at you right in the eye.
It's a test.
Like,
It's a test.
and do the test, right? So I think that we're always kind of failing at this, like that's, and that's kind of the point. I come down hard on all of these commandments because I see it as a litmus test that we're all failing. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to obtain it, but realize that God is holding us up even when we are failing it. And so I think even from a young age that we have problems keeping all this stuff. So that's why I'm kind of not real big on accountability. I think even young ones are doing stuff that's pretty devious and nasty. But just like anything, so this is how I like to describe a lot of stuff. A lot of people are probably tired of hearing this, but you haven't heard it yet, Kathy. Power outlets. Like whenever our kids get close to power outlets, we always freak out. Like, don't get close to that. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Now, imagine if we grew up still feeling that same way. Our phones would never get charged. We wouldn't have refrigeration in the house. All that stuff. As we get older, we realize like, oh, okay, this is a tool that I can use. Yeah, there's danger attached to it, but I know where the danger is and go forward. And I think as we grow up, we begin to see that more and more and more. And so that's how I liken us to living, right? So, as we continue growing up, we get further and further deeper into these Christian principles. So I really don't think there's like a time where it's like, oh, now it's up to you, right? I think from the very beginning, I think Jesus is working to save us and bring reconciliation to us. And I go way farther on that than most other people would, I think, to the point where it gives people heartburn. So I don't know what do anyone else want to say anything? That's kind of I made everyone real quiet, I guess.
You have a habit of doing that.
Yeah. It's a difficult thing. It's a difficult thing, but when we live in a difficult world. We live in a difficult world, and also we live in a difficult world where we realize that we're going to fail at this. And that's what the beauty of Jesus is that even though we've looked at people and we're like, I don't want them in my life. I don't want them there. And we push them away. And so I'm actually taken away from next week. But it's, I think when we look at what's going on around us right now, with all of our leaders and things like that, there's not a lot of trust that can be going around. And I think as Christians, I think we can say, yeah, but those people aren't the ones that are actually putting those people in charge. Like, we know that God is holding everything. And so that's why I make a big deal about elections. Like, if you think that this is the election to end all elections and everything's going to go in the crapper because of this one over there, like, put God back on the throne. Don't put them on the throne. And listen, I'm very political. Like, I get it. I pay attention to all this stuff pretty severely, and there's times when I have to back away from it. I'm like, I'm putting politics on the throne higher than it should be. And I need to realize that no matter what happens, God is still there. And I have a friend, there's a lot of people that don't like this, but I have a friend that doesn't vote because he knows if he does, it becomes a God for him. And I really admire that. I admire that because he is doing his best to be a servant of Christ. And he knows where his gods are. And he tries to deal with them. And if you disagree with anything I'm saying today, go back and listen to the Daniel sermon series. Go read the book of Daniel. Daniel, an overlording Nebuchadnezzar, and he still serves. Doesn't obey all the time, but he still serves. And so that's what he does. So I don't know. Any last thoughts?
One comment.
Yeah.
Okay. Not all parents are good.
No, they're not.
No. And, you get to a certain point and everything with it where you just don't want to be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where, we tend to disagree with you in that,
Yeah. Well, and that's why I don't like that term obey. That's why I don't like that term obey. And I also think in certain abusive circumstances, like especially like sometimes you got to separate yourself a little bit, but in that separation, you can still have a hidden majesty, like attributed to that person. Like that's like, yeah, like that's difficult. Like, listen, I'm not trying to go like, oh, it's easy, just do this. Stay in a garbage situation. That's not what I'm saying. Like, don't misunderstand me. There's a difference between living a healthy life and still honoring that person. Like, while I've been a pastor, I've had a surprising amount of confirmation students that their fathers are just raging alcoholics. And talking to them about this, like, how do they still honor their dad when their dad will beat them up? Like that's, what does it mean to be a foster parent, a foster kid, be in a foster care system and honor your parents when your parents aren't good enough to hold on to you, And I think that the difference is like, okay, even the garbage in this world, I can still serve. And serving means that we follow Jesus to the cross and we go and we lower ourselves. I mean, didn't Jesus wash Peter's feet when Peter completely denied him? Like that's, so I'm not saying that everyone needs to stay in those family systems, but I think we can still honor those people. That even though they're acting like a complete piece of garbage. So if we have a confirmation student here and they're in a bad situation and I start finding about it, we will we will take the appropriate actions, you know, that we have to do. All of that, but yeah, we don't throw people away. And so that's it's a difficult circumstance. So don't hear what I'm not saying. Serving is not just, well, I'm just going to accept the garbage that's coming out of this person. That's not what I'm saying. It's like still admitting that person is our parent. That's what I'm saying. And that's hard. There's a lot of people that's hard. And I get it. And I get it. I've had to deal with a lot of those people. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember it all. Coley and I got pretty heavily involved in the foster care community in Bentonville when we were in Arkansas. We haven't done that here, but we're pretty heavily involved in that community there. And you see a lot of stuff. And so this is, yeah. I don't know. Anything else? I feel like I need to end more triumphantly, but I don't know how to end this one. But I just wanted to show you guys that it means kind of being a servant. Sometimes that's hard. And living a life of humility, like following Jesus to the cross. And the cross doesn't mean the life is going to be easy. You know? But that's the way it goes. So I don't know. And again, you don't have to agree with me. I got no problem if you disagree with me. Like I got no problem with that. So I don't know. Anything else? Kathy?
I just would like to say on positive
Yeah.
that I
There's somebody back
She
there.
said she would like to say on a positive note. She's the youngest of 6 children.
3 people.
Yeah.
the point is that
There's 3 people in the congregation back by the organ.
I am in awe when I see how they work in tandem.
Is Gloria there?
I have. And the one in the middle.
It works so well.
Yeah. She says she's in awe of her older siblings. She's got like 6 of them, and how they all kind of work together and all of that. Like it's, yeah, like that's good. And if you read Luther's Large Catechism, and when he's talking about parents and authorities and all that stuff, you got to remember that the leaders in his day tried to kill Luther multiple times, you know, and that's before he wrote this. So he wrote that afterwards. The leaders tried to kill him, and his dad didn't want to have anything to do with him. He was a failure in his dad's eyes. So he wrote that, you know, in that circumstance. And it's hard. It's hard. Like and so, gosh, don't hear what I'm not saying. God is not telling you to just accept the beatings, to accept the abuse. That is not what God is saying, right? But he is saying honor, honor that person. And so, and that's a hard thing, but it's a good thing, because I think if we lowered ourselves, God has created this world in a cross-shaped vision where when we lower ourselves in humility and service to others, it tends to go better for us. And it tends to go better for the world. And I think that's what we're getting into as we go through this next section now. So if you liked this one, you're going to love next week. We're talking about killing people. And I know everyone's like, got that one, haven't killed anyone yet. You're all guilty. I like that. You're all guilty of that one. So it's great talking with you guys. And may God bless and keep all of you, that he would be with you constantly, and that we would find new ways to honor those around us and serve them. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Alrighty.
Have a good week.
You too.
See you all next week.